God kväll. Good evening. Good morning, I should say. Good morning. Um, it's just some things going through my head, and just some reaction. Going through, taking my head through some of the reactions I've not just past few days, but over the past few years, where I try to push us pagans to be more socially active, and there's always so much pushback. And whilst it comes across as anti-establishment, it feels to me more like a cross between either ignorance or fear, or a little bit of both. Now, I'm bound to make mistakes over, what I can recall of our origins, but for the most part, not far off, or bang on. So why can't we come to some agreement in look? This doesn't This doesn't necessarily include, and this isn't to be xenophobic or anything like that. This is more primarily to do with British pagans. Okay, pagans who live in this country, who are from this country, and whose beliefs are, have been known about in this island for hundreds of years. Thousands, whatever. Look, we suffered on different fronts, partly through our own greed and partly through forced conversion, partly through, waves of different immigration, wars. I suppose the aspect of monotheistic cultures has left us so that, that their aggressive aspect has kind of left us so that, I'll just check if that's a wind or the rats. Cool. Yep. Ow. With their aggressive superior mindset, superiority mindset. We think better than you. Our God is the only God. We are right. You are wrong. It's an absolutist point of view, but there has to be something to be said for their ability to, for the ability for monotheistic cultures to band together in a force. However, evolution is a massive thing. It's not just biological. It is the sociological aspect to it too. There's a sociological aspect to it too. Um, you know, a sociological / cultural aspect to it too. You know, every time a different culture is formed, it, you know, because of the differences in, you know, the ways that people think, you know, even within a certain ideal, ideas set, there's. Lady Sif, leave your sister alone. Come here. Come here. You see your sister picking on you? Is she? Is she picking on you? Um, so, you know, take Christianity for example, right? So you had the Roman Catholicism, and even that branched off into West and East. For example, you know, you know, just so that now you have the Eastern Orthodoxy of Catholicism, and you have the, you know, Western version of it, which stems from the Western Roman Empire. And then you get a little bit, you know, you go start going later on, and you start getting Protestantism, many offshoots of that. You got Mormonism, that's a different version of Christianity altogether. You know, you got the Jews and all their different, the different types of Judaism. Same with Islam. So, look, you get Mormons that try to say, don't call us Christian, but they still believe in God. Now, whilst Gallic or Gaulish Celts and northwestern and northern Germanic peoples do diverge by you know, a good 500 to 1,000 years. They're more closely related than they are to, say, you know, people from, you know, Eastern the Eastern Mediterranean, North African side of things. We are, you know, the Romans would, you know, they before they before they started to conquer the Gallic peoples, they and you know, when you started to get an integration between their culture, their cultures, they would call them barbarians just as much as the people to the north. You know, the Gauls to the, you know, to the, you know, immediate northwest and east of them, well, north and west of them, they call barbarians, but they also know of a different, you know, a slightly different type of barbarians, slightly, but they're still barbarians. But I also note that in Britain, the Brittonic Celts and the Anglo-Saxons, Frisians, Utahs. I know there was some conflict, but there was also some evidence of sort of cultural repopulation and somewhat of interbreeding, sort of. And you have a little bit later on, you have the Nordic coming over, and strangely enough, the Vikings were able to, you know, they were quite successful in both Ireland and Scotland. at a time where Scotland was Celt, Ireland was Celt, Wales was a fair bit Celt, but all of England pretty much, apart from maybe Cornwall and East Devon, was Anglo-Saxon. So, and it wasn't just conquering. They set up for a good 200-300 years in both, and there's still quite a lot of crossover between the two. If their cultures, and I'm not talking just about languages here, I'm also talking about what are you chewing at? What are you chewing at? Cowbag. What are you doing? Again, all right, I was saying not by necessarily language, but culturally and religiously, were they altogether that unintelligible to each other? I don't think so. Now, there's they pretty much all the all the European cultures are related and all basically are all descended from the Yamnaya, which I think was based around Ukraine, I think, modern day Ukraine, somewhere around that region. And go back up there. So I see a link there. Now, the point I'm getting to with this is that when trying to define pagans in this country, given that there is ancestor worship is a major thing a major crossover between them, and it goes back millennia, not just when the two crossed over around the Anglo-Saxon period in Britain. There is some there are some cultural similarities there. Especially with the more Brittonic Celts, I reckon, or Celts that had more contact with the northwestern Germanic peoples, like the Anglo-Saxons, Frisians, Utahs, and the Vendels and such. What are you doing over there? You distracting me with this video, love. So yeah, when it comes to defining us as pagans, I don't see why, defining us as being of Western, Northwestern, or Northern Germanic origin, cultural origin, that again, this would need to be hashed out with other pagans. We would need to hash this out. I sound like I'm trying to just come up with these ideas by myself. I'm not trying to take this as my sole responsibility here. I do want this to be a more open conversation. My knowledge is not infallible, and I am consistently doing more and more research, but just as the rest of us are. But my point with my video was that with my earlier video was that the government refused the petition to legalize or legitimize paganism in this country with the answer of we don't literally they answered with we don't understand what you're asking. We want to be seen, we want to be able to exercise our rituals, rites and holidays just as the rest of you are. We don't expect everyone to follow our beliefs. We just expect the right to be able to follow our beliefs, as long as they're not too extreme. We can't be more socially active if we're going to at every single point argue with ourselves. Look, debating and sorting through stuff with ourselves, that's something we ought to do. But consistently arguing with ourselves about what makes us pagan, well, surely the main points of, a love of nature and some form of ancestor worship, or, carry on of cultural traditions, these are things that can be identified and distinguished as pagan. I don't see what the argument is. Yes, there are differences between, there are differences between Gallic and Brittonic Celt. Woden is not Odin. They are cognate, but Woden is not Odin. Thor is not Dunor. They are cognate, but they are not the same. But that doesn't mean that, again, but that they are related. Christians, different types of Christians, they believe in doing different things in different ways, and they have different words for different things. But it's not just with Christians. It's with all sorts of different religions and cultures across the world. And it seems like we are trying to put ourselves in a bit of an exceptionalist light, when really isn't our ethos in general, to be in balance with the planet? There's a reason I choose the tree for everything. Why I've chosen it from my logo and such, and why I got it on my ring. It represents, to me, evolution. No, evolution doesn't necessarily. It's not quite as clean, but it's a good symbol. Now, you can use this as a symbol for life or whatever. To me, this is also a symbol of evolution and the multifaceted nature of evolution. And we evolve, you get the Reconstructionist pagans, you get the really cringe fucking, really hedonistic types, and everywhere in between. But if we identify ourselves as pagan, then surely there are actual commonalities that can be brought together to distinguish us and then legitimize us, and therefore legitimize us. There has to be. There are so many of us now. Patterns, there must be a pattern forming. I don't, mathematically, I don't see how there cannot be patterns forming. How there cannot be patterns forming so that we can distinguish what makes British pagan. You can say what makes an American pagan or continental European pagan, but purely in the context of British pagans, whether that's, and I'm talking about the islands of the British Isles, and that's Ireland as well. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, Ireland. I know you're independent, but still, the close cultural ties between all of them. And their offshoots into the modern day. I don't see why that they're just because one type of pagan is is a bit different to another type of pagan. Does that make one not pagan but the other one still pagan? No. Of course it fucking doesn't. That's just arrogant. It's arrogant and exceptionalist to believe such. To believe as such, it really is. It's okay, fair enough. This is my personal opinion, but it is, as far as I'm concerned, very arrogant to believe that it's the same argument that you get, but to me it reminds me of arguments between Protestants and Catholics, and they have fucking wars about that shit. Now, what I've not come across is wars between, in a single country, between, in Germanic cultures, throughout our history, and I did actually look for this, religious wars, where it's one god, where it's one god versus the other. I haven't really seen that. I only see it whenever there's a monotheistic culture involved. But I do believe that it's reasonable to be able to define us in Britain as pagan by saying that we are, by pointing to our Western, Northwestern and Northern Germanic origins, cultural origins. Go and look yourself. Honestly, I actually don't see the difficulties. I think are completely artificial. Well, they are obviously, but what's the right word? They're redundant. They don't mean anything. Not really. These are little arguments. They don't really mean anything because, like I said, in Britain, we are multicultural and have been for a very long time. But in the it's written in us in the stones in our country. The barrows and such. Ancestor worship. That's that. The earliest ancestor worship in this country was shown by the Neolithic peoples, but you know the Celtic peoples believed in their own in in ancestor worship in using celebrations with fire. Now they weren't necessarily at the same points in the year, but they weren't all that different. The descriptions of the gods of the different deities, they're not all that. They're not the same as each other. This must be singularly identified for some reason. I don't know why it has to be, but for some reason the absolutist social mindset these days leads people to completely jump onto the conclusion that I'm automatically saying that they're all the same. No, that's not what I'm saying. But they're all fairly similar, which to me points to a relation between them. We are already getting attacked by the monotheists and the right. We don't need to be turning in on ourselves. This is the same thing as the political left, for fuck's sake. I'm not saying that we should organise in such a way as to become militant or some stupid like that. But we don't also have to organise in, we don't, just because when it comes to these legalizations, they end up comes under an organized religion, and some people just don't like the term, right? But that doesn't necessarily have to mean exactly the same thing for every single religion. There are always differences. And this absolutist mindset drives me mad. Because it leads people to jump to the wrong conclusions all the time. And, it leads to misunderstandings all the fucking time. Leads to arguments all the fucking time. It's ridiculous. And yes, I do recognise that is sort of a bit of an absolute statement in of itself, but okay, most of the time, this is what happens. Because of an absolutist mindset, there are benefits, but I see more downsides than upsides to an absolutist mindset over a balanced mindset. I just do. It doesn't make sense. Are you two having fun in there? I know I got a bit of a ramble, but as I said, I feel a bit perturbed that when the subject's brought up, when this sort of things, when I bring this up, it devolves into an argument when I'm not even trying to make it one. We're all pagan. And I'm talking to the fellow pagans, right? It doesn't matter what type of pagan you are, we're all pagan. So why are we getting into arguments with each other over how to define pagans when we all recognise that we are pagans? Does anyone else not see the hypocrisy here? The contradiction here, sorry. I do. I recognise some contradiction here. That there seems to be this argument over what is a pagan, yet, when a pagan meets another pagan, they recognise each other as another pagan. Someone explain this to me. What's the things? What's difficult to understand? Tell me. This is ridiculous as far as I'm concerned. I said I want pagans to become more, to be talking more about this, about whether or not they want to be. It's not just about agreeing with me and wanting to be more socially active. It's actually having the conversations on whether or not we should be, and not being afraid to have these conversations. I hope I'm getting that across right. I'm not trying to. Yes, I want people to be on board with me, but I'm not expecting people to be on board with me. There is really something important that people have to understand. I don't expect people to just be on board with what with what I want. What I want is the discussion to happen. That's not an absolutist point of view. That's all I want is just the debate, just the discussion. But I don't see the discussion. And it's a little bit disheartening, if I'm honest. We can't move forward if we keep going round in circles. This is enough for me on this subject. I might put up another video in a little bit on something else, but this isn't supposed to be, by the way, a bitch against anyone in particular. And it really, really isn't, honestly. Instead of an immediate argument from fellow pagans about this, it's more about the discussion. You can outright deny it. If you want, you can outright deny it, but at least think about it, rather than just outright. At least think about it, and then say you don't want to do it, or you don't like it. I've had some really good responses of saying, I don't trust the government. I don't trust any politicians. That's fair enough. I don't agree with you, but I respect your opinion because that has been your experience. Okay, if you're not just I think I've said this in other videos, but if you're basing your opinion on facts, but if it's not just, if you can't base it on facts, then on your own experience, which in of itself can be facts, then, and not just on someone else's opinion, then you will get I will more than willing to respect your opinion, so long as it's not completely stupid. But completely denying the conversation, like I said, one idiot kind of trying to yesterday trying to say to me that paganism is better than religion. That statement doesn't even make sense. So how about we go for a bit more discussion and debate? How about, comments? Leave comments. Have a discussion in the comment section. This YouTube is linked to my Facebook. If you want to chat to me personally about this, chat to me on Facebook. I don't care. But the discussion needs to be had. There's so many pathetic discussions. Discussions about stupid shite. And when, a petition like this doesn't even get recognised usually, I don't think, unless like 10,000 signatures are put forward. And I reckon, I didn't get to see, I didn't find the numbers for it, but I do reckon that there were more than 10,000 signatures for this. And the government still treated it with utter contempt. We're not helping ourselves. We're all pagan. Let's stop arguing about what makes us pagan, because Christians and Muslims and Jews do that. We recognise each other as pagans. Let's stop arguing about who's actually right, because that's not. I'm pretty sure that's not actually our way. Historically, that is. So, let's grow up. Have an adult conversation about this. Because, and I'm not going to stop. I'm expecting pushback. I'm expecting. One of my first videos, I was talking about this. I expect apathy. I expect rejection and refusal. But I'm hoping that that's not all I'm going to be expecting. And again, that's not all I've had. But there's so many people. There are a lot of people that have watched these videos and yet have had nothing to say about it. I implore you, discuss. Please, leave comments, discuss, debate. Just don't let it get into the realm of bitchy arguments for fuck all reason. Please. And I know there are going to be some trolls out there, but seriously, come on. We can have a proper discussion about this if we're not afraid to do so. I hope this gets through to someone. It's a bit of a wind up, if I've got to be honest. That I've got to actually re-explain this again. That I don't think in absolute. When it comes to this stuff, I don't think in absolute terms. And assuming that it's an illogical way of thinking anyway. So, how about we try a bit of critical thinking of our own beliefs? I've done that much myself. That's why I've ended up in this position, where I'm talking to you guys on the net. Because I've criticised my own position so many times that it'd be nice to see what everyone else has got to say on these subjects, I should say. Let me know. Seriously, let me know. I want some feedback. Like, subscribe. This has been Shadowita. This has been my dog Viska. You've seen the girls. The white one is Freya. The other one, brown and white, that's Lady Sif. Hope everyone was a good evening. Again, 2 o'clock in the morning. Hope everyone was a good morning. and bless her Thursday.